The chains around my wrists were cutting into my skin, but I did not look down. I looked forward, at the crowd of aliens laughing at me from the auction platform. Their laughter echoed through the metal dome like thunder that never stopped. I was the only human in that entire market. Maybe the only human left in the galaxy who was not hiding on Earth, pretending the sky above us was empty. A tall alien with gray skin and 3 eyes leaned toward the seller and said something in a language I did not understand, but I understood the tone. He was asking why anyone would pay for a creature with no claws, no fangs, no armor plating, nothing but soft skin and 2 weak legs. The seller answered proudly, calling me a rare specimen from a quarantined world, a curiosity, cheap labor with hands built for fine work, nothing more. I had been taken 3 months earlier, when a survey ship found our world by accident and decided we were harmless enough to sample instead of study. They took 6 of us from a small coastal town in England. I was the only one who survived the transport. The bidding did not take long. A trader named Voss bought me for less than the price of a cargo crate. He ran a menagerie on a rundown station at the edge of civilized space, a place where dying species were kept in cages for entertainment. I was given a small room next to the animal pens and told to keep the enclosures clean. That was my new life, feeding creatures that could kill me in a second, while a species that once mocked my planet decided whether I deserved food that day. On my second night there, I found the creature they called the failed experiment. It was massive, twice my height, with dark gray scales and long limbs built for speed. Deep scars ran across its back, and its ribs pushed against its skin like it had not eaten properly in weeks. It lay curled in the corner of its cage, barely breathing, its eyes half closed. The handlers avoided that cage completely. They said it was broken beyond use, a mistake that should have died during transport. I stood there for a long moment, watching it breathe, and something in me refused to walk away. I had felt that same hollow exhaustion. I knew what it looked like when a living thing gave up. That night, I slipped part of my ration through the bars. The creature did not move for a long time. Then, slowly, its head lifted, and its eyes opened just enough to look at me. I kept doing that every night. I talked to it, even though I knew it could not understand my words. I told it about rain on my hometown, about the ocean, about my mother's voice. I think it was not the words that mattered, but the fact that someone kept coming back. Within 2 weeks, it was standing. Within a month, it was healed enough to move freely inside its cage, watching me with sharp attention every time I entered the enclosure area. I named it Ash, because its scales reminded me of burnt wood, gray and quiet, holding heat underneath. The other workers on the station began to notice. Ash no longer flinched away from me. It leaned toward me at the bars. Once, when a handler raised a shock rod near my back during a punishment, Ash slammed against the cage wall with enough force to crack the metal frame. The handler backed away immediately. Word of that reached Voss, and Voss brought in a broker to look at Ash more closely. The broker's name was Kellen, a thin, nervous trader who studied Ash's bone structure through the bars for almost an hour without speaking. When he finally stepped back, his hands were shaking. He said the word Vraktil like it was something forbidden. I had never heard the name before, but the reaction around the station told me everything. Workers stopped walking near the cage. Guards were doubled overnight. Voss locked himself in his office for hours, making calls to buyers across 3 different systems. I later learned the truth from pieces of conversation I was never supposed to hear. Decades ago, the Vrakthil were a species so dangerous that 3 separate empires joined forces just to stop them. Not out of hatred, but out of fear. A full-grown Vrakthil could tear through a squad of armed soldiers without slowing down, and their intelligence made them impossible to trap using ordinary methods. The war to end them lasted 10 years, and cost more lives than anyone wanted to admit. When it finally ended, Every empire in the region declared the species extinct. Ash was not extinct. Ash was young, wounded, and forgotten in the back corner of a broken-down station, kept alive only because nobody bothered to check what it truly was. Now that they knew, everyone wanted it. Within 2 days, ships began arriving at the station. Bounty hunters wanting a trophy, collectors wanting a weapon, Empire scouts wanting to erase the evidence that their old enemy still existed. Voss tried to control the bidding, but the station was too small and too poorly defended for what was coming. I stayed near Ash's cage as much as I could, cleaning the enclosure, checking its wounds, keeping its space calm while chaos built outside. Ash pressed its head against my hand through the bars each time I came close, as if checking that I was still there. On the third night, the station's alarms started screaming. Ships had broken through the outer docking ring. Armed groups poured into the station corridors, moving straight for the menagerie section. Voss tried to negotiate, tried to sell Ash to the highest bidder before anyone else could take it by force, but the situation had already slipped past his control. I was dragged from the enclosure area by 2 guards, my hands still chained, pulled toward a holding room while gunfire echoed through the station halls. Metal groaned overhead as something heavy crashed through the upper deck. In the confusion, one of the guards lost his grip on my chain. I twisted free and ran, not away from the danger, but straight back toward the cages. Ash's enclosure had been hit during the chaos. The front barrier was cracked open, sparks falling from a damaged support beam above it. 3 armed figures stood in front of the broken cage, weapons raised, ready to bring down the very thing that empires once went to war to destroy. I did not think. I stepped between them and Ash. One of the armed figures shouted at me to move. I did not move. My hands were still chained, my legs were shaking, and I had nothing to defend myself with, except my own body standing in the way. Behind me, I heard the low, deep sound of Ash rising to its full height for the first time since I had known it. It did not attack out of hunger or rage. It moved because I had stood my ground, and for the first time since it was captured, something in the galaxy had chosen to stand beside it instead of against it. What followed was fast and overwhelming. Ash moved with a speed the armed figures were not prepared for, disarming them one by one, never allowing a single shot to reach where I stood. The corridor filled with shouting, with the sound of metal buckling, with the sudden retreat of hunters who had come expecting an easy trophy and found something ancient and awake instead. Word of what happened on that station spread faster than any ship could carry it. Someone on board one of the arriving vessels had been recording the moment I stepped in front of Ash, and the footage reached open channels before the fighting had even ended. The galaxy that had laughed at humanity now watched a human stand unarmed beside a creature they feared more than any weapon they had ever built, and watched that creature choose to protect him without being commanded to. Within hours, official ships from 3 different empires arrived at the station, not to attack, but to observe. Diplomats who had never once acknowledged Earth's existence suddenly wanted to speak with me directly. Voss, seeing the shift in power, quietly disappeared before anyone could ask him difficult questions about where he obtained a living Vrokthil in the first place. I stood in the center of that station, chains finally cut from my wrists, with Ash resting its massive head gently against my shoulder, and I realized the laughter had stopped completely. They did not fear me because I was strong. They did not respect me because of any weapon or army behind me. What changed their minds was simple, and it was something none of them expected from a species they had dismissed as harmless and unimportant. I had shown kindness to something broken when no one else would. I had refused to run when everything told me to, and that was enough to make an ancient predator choose loyalty over instinct, and enough to make an entire galaxy reconsider everything it believed about humanity. In the days that followed, I was given a new title I never asked for. Ambassador, the first human to speak for Earth in a room full of representatives who once ignored our planet entirely. Ash stayed by my side through every meeting, calm and steady, answering to no empire and no leash, only to me. The galaxy that once laughed now listened, not because we had conquered anything, and not because we had proven ourselves through strength alone, but because they finally understood what humanity truly was capable of when given nothing but a chance to care. And somewhere far behind us, on a quiet blue planet that had been ignored for so long, no one back home even knew yet that everything had changed.